Should I help let people in too?
Okay, looks like people are in.
Welcome, everyone. We think we're having a little trouble because some people, the link from the website isn't working for everyone. So we're going to wait just a minute or so here and let people try to join. Okay, so maybe we should go ahead and get started, and some folks will probably be coming in a little bit late, but hopefully everybody will find their way in eventually here. So I'm Kelly Kearns, and I'm a member of the monthly meeting team, and I will be helping getting things started here tonight. And I'd like to introduce you to the other two members of the monthly meeting team that are with us tonight, Lee Langford and Susan Nossel. So welcome, everyone, to tonight's monthly meeting of 350 Wisconsin. Lee, would you like to do the land acknowledgement?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Kelly. Before we move into the rest of our meeting, let's ground ourselves by taking 2 deep breaths. And reflect on how we're connected to the land beneath our feet. With humility and respect, I acknowledge I'm speaking to you from sacred and continuously inhabited Ho-Chunk land, the Four Lakes region known to the Ho-Chunk people as Tejo. We are inspired by the Ho-Chunk's vision of stewardship and seek to emulate their relationship with nature as sacred.
Oh, Kelly, you're still on mute.
I think you're still on mute, Kelly.
Sorry about that, folks. So here's an overview of tonight's meeting. Well, an extra warm welcome to anyone who's here for the first time. I hope you feel welcome. There should be a time at the end of the meeting for you to connect with other 350 members and learn more about what we do. So we want 350's Wisconsin's public meetings to be a welcoming and supportive place for all, regardless of background or identity. Our code of conduct is being shared in the chat to provide more context. So please contact the monthly meeting if you have any questions about this. So we're going to have a number of announcements here, and we'll start off with Kristen.
Everyone, my name is Kristen Clark. I'm our development manager, and we have some news we're pretty excited about. Instead of our traditional Giving Tuesday celebration that folks may have attended in past years, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, instead this year we're moving up our community celebration and fundraiser, and we're inviting you to a special community gathering at the Aldo Leopold Nature Center, a venue that embodies the beautiful Wisconsin places that we're fighting for. Join us for guided nature walks, a community bonfire, live music, and moments of reflection, and a lot more. We have a lot more details coming out in the weeks, so keep your eyes peeled. But we hope that you will scan the QR code, which will add the event to your calendar as a save the date. But also, if you're not a QR code type person, if you just want to write down Sunday, October 19th, in the evening, we hope to see you there. It's going to be a really lovely evening celebrating our community, and we're excited about our new venue and all these different activities we have planned. So we really hope to see you there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have something about the Willie Street Fair. Russ, are you on?
I just joined, so
Just Diane. Okay,
yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Diane and Russ, and I would like to invite everyone to join us who would like to join us at the Willie Street Parade on Sunday, September 21st. The parade is actually from noon to 11 to noon. We'll meet at 10:30. You can there are these incredible puppets that have been made over the spring. We've made new creature hats, or you could carry a streamer or a banner, or just walk along with us. The more the merrier. And it's a great place from which to recruit volunteers and really just spread some upbeat positivity and energy, which we could all really use. But activism can be fun. So it's really a great time. We're going to be tabling there that weekend too. So it's a great way to draw attention to our table. Thanks.
okay, thank you, Diane. And Emily, I think you have the rest of the announcements.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard that coming up on September 28th is the Wisconsin Climate March. This will be the first large-scale climate mobilization in Wisconsin since the start of the second Trump administration. This is also going to be coming at the end of Climate Week, so a really critical time to be showing people in power that we are demanding strong climate action, also demanding good funding for the scientific research that goes into supporting climate action, and then also demanding that we protect our democracy to every extent possible. There's a lot of volunteer roles, so we hope that you sign up, but there's also just lots of ways for people to get involved if they just show up on the day of. So we encourage you to go to wisconsinclimatemarch.org to learn more. And we would also love it if you wanted to create a why I'm marching video to tell people why you think it's important. We've got a QR code there to scan for more information, and then some tiny URLs with some more information. Next, please. I also wanted to remind people that we have a webinar coming up this Thursday, the 11th at 7 p.m. Some of you may have heard of the endangerment finding, which is in danger of being revoked by the EPA. Essentially, the endangerment finding is the thing that gives the EPA the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. And the EPA under Trump is proposing to just say that it doesn't exist anymore, which would basically give them the excuse of saying, we don't have to regulate greenhouse gases from any source at all. If this succeeds, if the EPA does roll this back, this, I think, would be the largest blow to climate action under Trump so far. Worse than the rollback on the IRA, worse than anything else. So we absolutely need as many people as possible to be submitting comments. The EPA is required by law to read and address all of the comments. So we're going to have a webinar telling you a little bit more about what the endangerment finding is, why it's important, and then how to create the most impactful comment possible. We will be recording it, but we hope that you can join us live on Thursday. Now I'm going to be introducing the rest of our speakers today. I'm really excited to have everybody join us today for our Energy Justice in Wisconsin panel. We've got a really exciting lineup of speakers who will be able to talk to us about the energy justice work happening at the national level, and then diving into some more community-specific work happening around our state. So our four speakers today will be Charles Hua from PowerLines, Bryan Rogers from Walnut Way, Dr. Brittany Keys from Healthy Climate Wisconsin, and Stephanie Robinson, of course, of 350 Wisconsin. So we're going to start with Charles. So Charles Hua is the founder and executive director of PowerLines, which we're going to learn about in a minute. Before that, he has worked on advancing building electrification with Rewiring America. He has worked on a lot of environmental sustainability activism projects through his work at Harvard. And of course, Charles is a Madison native, where he did a lot of grassroots work trying to get the Madison School District to get clean energy at the schools. So we are proud to see where Charles has gone, and I will turn it over to Charles.
Well,
Oh, and
thanks so much,
Charles is,
Emily.
the screen share went away.
Okay.
I can do it from my end if that's easier. It's up either way.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's
perfect.
see. All right.
Let's see. I think there should be pictures. I wonder if, I don't know, there may be a formatting. Let's see. Yeah, let me try to do it this way.
Okay.
Does it show up like this way? Does that show up?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sweet. Great. Well, thanks so much, Emily. Thanks to the 350 team for having me. It's good to see a bunch of familiar faces. I think some that I maybe haven't seen in gosh, almost a decade, I think. But as Emily mentioned, I got my roots in this work back when I was a student at Madison West High School. And I think fair enough to say that the topic and the importance of energy has only become exponentially more important. High school was when I first learned what a public service commission was. I think maybe it was actually a 350 volunteer or a Sierra Club volunteer that had explained to me as a high schooler what a utility regulator is and why it matters. And have to say that's something that stuck with me ever since. And that led me to found this new organization called PowerLines. We're a national consumer advocacy group focused on reforming and modernizing our utility regulatory system, in particular to tackle this issue of rising utility bills in this moment where there is so much pressure on this issue. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks relatively quick, roughly 15 minutes, but really try to characterize and set the scene around issues of energy affordability nationally, and sort of lay the foundational framework for the other speakers on this call as well. So why don't we get into it? So earlier this year in April, PowerLines, we put out this report called Utility Bills Are Rising. Put simply, utility bills are rising. The average electric bill in this country has significantly increased. It's not just a issue specific to any one region at this point. Every region is experiencing some kind of pressures around rising utility bills. And that's because the price of electricity has increased quite a bit. So in the last 5 or so years, residential electric prices have increased about 30%, and just 10% this year alone. And gas prices have increased about 40% since 2019. So there is significant upward pressure on electric prices that is even surpassing inflation in a moment where inflation has been in the national discussion for quite some time in terms of the impacts to folks' pocketbooks. And yet, electricity is one of the fastest growing pressures facing people's wallets. So as you can see, both electric and gas outpace inflation. And part of that is because in the last couple of years, we have seen an exponential proliferation and growth in the rate increase requests from electric and gas utility companies. In 2023, at that time, it had reached a record $18 billion. And you see that big spike in the last couple of years. If you actually map that out to 2025, it is even crazier. So we put out this report a couple months back. That was the Q2 update of the report that I mentioned earlier, which showed that in the first 2 quarters, the first half, the first 6 months of 2025, utility rate increase requests totaled $29 billion just in the first half, which set a record for any year with 6 months left to go. We put that out and we got an incredible amount of discussion in the national media, in the Financial Times, in Vox, and Bloomberg, in Time Magazine, even in the Daily Mail, on CBS, and E&E News. And part of that is because this is no longer just an energy story. This has now become a mainstream economic, consumer, business, finance story. And that's because rising electric prices impacts everybody. It impacts you and me as consumers. It impacts small businesses. It impacts even the large industrial customers. And so this is something that's creating a lot of challenges for a lot of different stakeholders. And that's why we're starting to see this also now become a political issue where you're seeing the political media talk about it. You're seeing elected officials and candidates for governor in New Jersey and Virginia talk about electric prices. The New Jersey governor, in fact, has had 4 tweet threads about PJM, the Mid-Atlantic grid operator, and why they're to blame for rising electric prices in the last month on her official campaign platform. And I think if anything, that shows that there's a broader set of folks these days beyond the traditional energy sphere that's paying attention to these issues, that has to pay attention to these issues. So who's impacted by this? Well, it's a lot of people. So, just the rate increases in Q2 that I mentioned have impacted over 40 million customers across the country, including 8 million in the Midwest. But at a national scale, the issue of energy poverty, energy unaffordability is very pronounced. There's roughly 80 million Americans that are struggling to pay their utility bills, meaning that they're trading off their education, their food, their healthcare, their rent just to afford their utility bills. Because, of course, if they don't pay those bills, then there's a risk they get shut off from the system. And if you don't have electricity, then forget anything else in terms of having a productive modern life. And so that's a serious problem that a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate the scale to which the number of Americans impacted is so large. And so when we think about that fact, combined with the fact that there's really not been that much national media discussion or political organizing around utility bills specifically, why this moment we feel like is particularly ripe for an advocacy effort that can name the problem, propose solutions, and build a broader coalition that spans political affiliation, that spans geography, that spans type of customer across the residential, commercial, and industrial class, because everybody across the board is being impacted. That's true for, not to get too in the weeds here, wholesale electricity prices actually have seen some downward pressure, but that hasn't translated into decreases in retail prices, which is another problem, which means that there's some kind of gap or lag in our regulatory infrastructure. And, Wisconsin's in what's called MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. It's the electricity market that covers the bulk of the Midwest. And we saw earlier this year that the capacity auction prices jumped by 22x from year over year, which I don't know the exact amount that's going to translate into bill increases. But the neighbors to our right in PJM in the Mid-Atlantic region, they had a 9x increase, and that led to 20% bill increases one time. I got my bill, I live in DC now, and that's in PJM, and it spiked 20%. Now, MISO, it does its math a little bit differently. It's not going to be likely, it's going to be less than 20% likely, even though the increase is larger than 9x, but still there's upward pressure on electricity prices. That's true in California and across the West with wildfires. That's true in New England with gas prices and fuel costs. That's true in Georgia with nuclear. So huge challenge across the board in terms of what's putting upward pressure on prices. And that's led governors, state legislators, utilities, public service commissioners across the country to really name this as an issue and get some political heat as a result of the challenges that we're seeing. So we also put out some polling to try to quantify, okay, how are people actually relating to this issue of rising utility bills? We know that this is a problem, but exactly how severe of a problem do people feel like it is? So I'm going to go through these fairly quick, but none of this is totally surprising, but 2 and 3 bill payers say their bills have increased. 3 and 4 are concerned about their utility bills rising this year. 4 and 5 at the lowest income level are concerned. That's consistent across political party. Democrats, Republicans, and independents are all equally concerned about rising electric and gas bills. Majority of Americans feel that their bills are adding to their financial stress. That's certainly true for the lowest income Americans. And interestingly, 3 in 5 Americans don't feel like their state government is doing a good enough job to protect their interests as energy consumers. And that is true across Democrats, Republicans, and independents as well. And that was surprising to us because across the board for all of our questions, even a question about folks' sentiment towards their state government, we saw consistent figures, identical figures across Democrats, independents, and Republicans. And what that suggests to us is that there is a true opportunity to capture the full tent of all consumers around this issue that we can drive progress towards a more equitable and fair and affordable energy system. People don't feel like they understand what drives their utility costs. And this was kind of the headline statistic that I frequently reference, which is that 4 in 5 Americans feel powerless over these bills. And part of that is because it changes so much month to month. Part of that is because people don't know what they're being charged for. Part of that is, you know, this is unlike almost any other product where you don't know how much you're paying as you're using the products. And then part of it is like, even to the extent that there's transparency on your utility bill, how can you understand what a transmission charge or a delivery charge or a fuel adjustment charge is? And so that's leading the sense of powerlessness combined with the fact that people don't realize that there are, in Wisconsin's case, 3 public service commissioners that actually are the final say on how much people pay for energy, and that there are opportunities to channel that voice as a consumer, that powerful voice as a consumer, towards advocacy in a way that is responsive to the decision makers that ultimately call the shots. And perhaps unsurprisingly, vast majority of people had no idea who their state utility regulator is. And the lack of public awareness and engagement has created a ton of problems. But because affordability is in the national spotlight, we think that there is a unique opportunity for us to significantly expand the pool of folks that are aware of what public service commissions are, why they matter, what they do, and how they can get involved. So to talk about kind of the current lay of the land, of course, data centers are driving up electricity demand. Of course, manufacturing is driving up electricity demand. And of course, electrification is driving up electricity demand. Now, the relationship between electricity demand and cost is complicated. This, again, isn't like any other product where, economics 101 would say, oh, it's simple. Rising demand means rising prices. In electricity, it's a little bit different because there's a monopoly. And so a utility, for instance, if it proposes building new power plants, to meet new demand, it's really the power plant costs that are directly leading to increases in bills. And of course, this is salient in Wisconsin's case, where in response to new demand, the utilities proposed the build out of new power plant infrastructure, of which, there's questions around how much exactly do we need and what is cost effective for consumers. So to understand that, you have to get a little bit into PUC and rate making 101. Of course, our electric system spans generation, which is the power plants. It spans transmission, which is the big poles and wires along highways. It spans distribution, which is the small poles and wires in your backyard. And of course, you're the end consumer. We have our markets, and PUCs are really important. Now, this is not going to be a surprise to folks on this call, but this is what PowerLines is really focused on, is bringing a light and channeling the voice of consumers towards public service commissions. They're important because they determine how much people pay for energy. They're important because they determine how much utilities invest in different types of energy. They're important because they determine where energy projects are located. They're not like any other government body in that they have functions that span legislative. So when they create rulemaking, for instance, it spans judicial, for instance, when they decide on contested rate cases. And it spans executive, for instance, when they're implementing certain programs like rebates and things like that. And so these 200 people, they oversee more than $200 billion a year in utility spending. So that's $1 billion a public utilities commissioner. And we call them the U.S. Supreme Court Justices of Energy because that's how powerful they are. They have a tremendous degree of influence. And at $1 billion a person, this is a really important stakeholder that we need to pay more attention to going forward, especially in a moment where bills are increasing so much. So just to kind of lay the scene here before I wrap up. Most PUC commissioners are appointed, certainly the case in Wisconsin, where the governor appoints the public service commissioners. Generally 3 or 5 members, sometimes 7. In Wisconsin's case, there's 3 public service commissioners. And their terms generally last 4 to 6 years, although most states lack term limits. Wisconsin's case, 6-year terms. So even more important that when a governor is making a public service commissioner appointment, that they're doing so thoughtfully with the interests of consumers front and center in their decision-making process. So I think I'll close with an anecdote, which is, this is a picture of New Orleans. I was down there 2 weeks ago, actually. It coincidentally was the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. New Orleans has some of the highest utility bills in the country. It has some of the worst reliability in the country. And, you know, we had an Uber driver who was a restaurant manager who worked late night shifts and drove Ubers to make extra income. And he said that he moved out of New Orleans because the number one reason was because he couldn't afford his utility bills. And that's a pretty remarkable statement, that something that is seen as a fairly trivial expense is the number one reason why somebody who grew up in a place that they called home had to leave that city that they loved. And he asked me, what's a fuel adjustment charge? And I thought that was a really revealing question, because it shows that, to me, going back to that 4 in 5 Americans feel powerless statistic, it's not that people are not paying attention. It's not that people don't want to see change. It's not that people are disinterested in things as unsexy as utility regulation, but it's that we need to create pathways and vehicles for folks to be able to make their voices heard in productive ways. We need to illuminate the decision makers like public service commissioners that ultimately call the shots and have outsized influence and have been operating outside of the public eye for such a long time. And I go back to this story because it's a really telling story about what the risks are if we don't get this right. But it's also a positive story, because I asked him if he knew what the Public Service Commission was, and he said he didn't, but that he would do his research and look into it. And I think that's the moment that we're in. We're in a moment where energy affordability is the number one issue, not just within energy, not just within economic issues, but it's becoming the top economic and political issue. And so when we think about channeling political pressure and advocacy around this topic and holding regulatory bodies and our utility regulatory system accountable to the public interest, there is not a better time than now to make sure that we build the political pressure around this issue of energy affordability in a way that makes sure that consumers are represented in both the process and the outcomes of these utility regulatory bodies. So that's my challenge to all of you, is just how can we build off of these tailwinds and capture and unlock some of these new opportunities and make sure that consumers are the top part of the picture going forward. So I will stop there. Here's my contact information if folks want to reach out. Would certainly love to hear from folks and just generally continue the conversation.
Thanks so much, Charles. And just a reminder, if anybody has any questions for Charles or any of our other speakers, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to put your questions into the chat. Next up, we have Bryan Rogers. Bryan Rogers is the Environmental Justice Director at Walnut Way Conservation Corps, which is a resident-led community-based organization on Milwaukee's North Side, where he leads the Environmental Justice and Infrastructure Initiative, also known as EJII, to build a cross-class, multiracial, statewide movement for energy democracy and community self-determination in Wisconsin. His work connects faith communities, resident leaders, and grassroots organizations to confront utility power, fight fossil fuel expansion, and advance an abolitionist vision of climate and energy justice rooted in care, imagination, and collective action. A community organizer, musician, and writer, Bryan brings both strategic clarity and creative spirit to the struggle for a world where everyone can thrive. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm going to share my screen. I have about 1/40th of the slides that Charles had. That was such an excellent context. Let's see, can y'all see it? Maybe now?
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful. Let me Oh, if you hear my children fighting in the bathtub in the background. Okay. Beautiful. Oh. Yeah, I lost it. I'm sorry.
I think yeah, I think you were sharing the right screen and then the wrong screen.
Okay. Oh no. Okay, there's a problem with too many windows open. Here we go. Okay. All right, so yeah, thanks again for that introduction, and Charles for setting that context so clearly. It seems like a lot of that polling that PowerLines did, that like talking about energy justice at the national level can sometimes feel abstract, but here in Wisconsin, it is painfully local. And so whether families can't keep the lights on this month, whether elders can't stay warm through the winter, whether our parents are forced to choose between paying the utility bill or buying groceries. And so here is let me slide that down. So this is energy burden data from late 2021 in We Energies, which is the largest utility, the most powerful, the most profitable utility in the state of Wisconsin. And so you can see the darker areas on the map represent families paying more, an outsized share of their income, often up to 10% or more. And so extreme energy burden is anything over 6%. Extreme energy burden is up to anything over 10%. And so we can see that this burden does not fall evenly. If you map this onto race and onto class, it's the exact same map. And so falls hardest on renters, on low income households, on Black and brown neighborhoods, and especially in Milwaukee and Racine. It's in those very same places where you see hypersegregation, where it's the oldest and most inefficient housing stock, where there's drafty homes, aging furnace, little insulation. Renters, even if they wanted to, can't upgrade. And so they're stuck with paying more for less. And so we have people that come into our offices all the time saying that they're paying anywhere between $300 and $500 a month for their utility bills. And it's what we call energy redlining, where communities with the least power end up paying the most. And this is systemic. We see this all over. And so now if you layer on top of this energy burden map the rate increases that We Energies has gotten approved from the Public Service Commission just in the last 4 years, we see 9.2% in 2023, 2.3% in 2024. And then last year they got approved for a rate increase of about 11% over the next 2 years. And so that means just in the last 4 years, people's bills will have gone up by 25%. In the last 20 years, they've gone up about 120%. And although there's been some wage growth in Wisconsin, maybe between 5 and 8% in recent years, the gap between what families can earn and what it costs to keep the light on is increasingly widening. And so when utilities claim unpaid bills hurt their bottom line, they actually still recover those costs. They recover them through rates, they recover them through fees, through subsidies. And so customers end up actually paying that twice, not only on their own bills, but then again when their neighbor can't afford theirs. And so while families struggle, We Energies, the parent company, We Energies is thriving. Shareholders are getting bigger dividends. The bonuses for executives are multi-million dollars every year. And so it's extremely flush times for the utility. And so Charles had mentioned this sort of opportune moment where energy affordability is becoming very much a part of the national conversation, a political question, and that grassroots organizations organizing and having political education about how rates are set, who holds the power to make those decisions, and how much influence utilities wield and have historically wielded in shaping regulatory outcomes and in influencing legislative process. He could not be more right. At Walnut Way, we've intervened in rate cases to put energy affordability on the record squarely and have pressed the Public Service Commission. And so back in 2022, Walnut Way refused to settle in that year's rate case and forced an outcome whereby the Public Service Commission mandated Walnut Way, the utility, the Citizens Utility Board, and several other stakeholders to go through an investigation docket to co-design and then implement a percentage of income payment program, which would cap people's energy bills at a percentage of their household income. And almost 3 years on, although that process will culminate in a final report with recommendations, with components of a low-income forgiveness tool. I think one of the lessons we've learned in that process is that the amount of heat and outside pressure that needs to go into trying to move the needle on some of the policy inertia of the Public Service Commission and the utility is it's an extreme lift. And so what started off as what felt like a promise for there to be this low-income alternative payment program that would actually address one of the causes of energy insecurity, the rising rates of energy bills, has now sort of over the course of 3 years been slushed into a soft recommendation written by PSC staff to the commission. In other words, nothing that has necessarily any teeth or enforcement mechanisms to it. So we mobilized communities to testify at hearings. We've worked with organizations across Wisconsin, including 350.org and Healthy Climate Wisconsin, Sierra Club, and others to fill rooms at public hearings, bringing Black elders, church leaders, tenants, and neighborhood residents together. And, when regulators look out and see those faces, they're no longer able to pretend that this is purely a technical matter. They're forced to confront the actual reality that affordability is and has been a public crisis. And so let me go to the next slide here. One of the things I think we've been learning on this journey in the utility regulatory space is that when we try to get information about the actual crisis that people are going through, we know people's bills are going up. We know that in Wisconsin, they do have cold weather moratoriums, although they don't have hot weather moratoriums. And from the heat waves and wildfires this summer, we know that that's an increasing risk to people's public health. That actually getting data on disconnections is not something that the utilities are required to do at all. And so, although what that means is that families can be cut off from essential energy service, and the public really has no clear picture of how widespread that suffering really is. And so the harm is invisibilized. And meanwhile, shareholder profits, executive bonuses are fully transparent, published every quarter, easy to find. And so we can track corporate earnings down to the penny. We cannot name the number of families that are sitting in the dark. And we don't actually believe that that asymmetry is an accident. It protects the monopoly from accountability. All of that, families are being disconnected, and We Energy's also using ratepayer money in order to lobby politicians against the public interest. They have armies of lawyers that dominate and capture the regulatory space, and We Energies is the largest charitable donor in the state of Wisconsin. And so they have all these, they're able to brandish their image and extend their interests, but who's actually end up paying for it is ratepayers. When they go to the Public Service Commission next year to ask for their next rate increase, certainly they factor all of that in. And so now utilities are looking to serve a new wave of extremely energy intensive facilities, data centers, as Charles mentioned. Each one can use up as much power between 30,000 and 550,000 homes. And utilities, they run the same lines that they're promised them they're going to be reliable and discounted energy while families are still facing shutoffs. And so we consider it to be very much a manufactured demand. If anybody remembers the Foxconn con, it's like that seemingly all over again, where you have a big multi-billion-dollar corporation like Microsoft coming in and saying that they are going to that they're going to build this plant. They've delayed construction on it several times already. And so big promises seem to never materialize. We, the public, are stuck with stranded assets that we end up footing the bill for. And so it's the same, it has been with coal plant retirements. And so I think that brings us to a bigger truth that we can't expect the monopoly utility to be the protagonist of any kind of just transition. Their model depends on extracting profit from basic human needs. And that's why we see energy redlining, why disconnections are weaponized, and why fossil fuel plants continue to get built despite massive public opposition and the known harms that it causes both to people's pocketbooks, public health, and the climate. And so if we want a different outcome, we need a fundamentally different structure. And so that's why we've been advocating for public power, which means energy systems owned by and accountable to the people. And it means reinvesting profits into communities and not to shareholders, centering health, affordability, and climate instead of endless corporate expansion. So I would just close with this, that the fight for energy justice in Wisconsin is far from abstract. It shows up every month in utility bills, in shutoff and disconnection notices, and every summer in the air that we breathe. And so we can't just negotiate with monopoly utilities and hope that they change their stripes. To win actual energy justice, we have to build public power that belongs to the people, serves the people, and sustains the people. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Brittany, I see you're asking to be allowed to share your screen. So would you rather share your own slides than have Lee share your slides for you?
I think it'll cruise a little quicker for, yeah.
Okay. So next up we have Dr. Brittany Keys. Dr. Brittany Keys is a physical therapist and clean air policy manager with Healthy Climate Wisconsin and convener with the State Line Clean Air Coalition. She also works on addressing environmental injustices and elevating the work of other leaders as the chair of the Climate Justice Committee with the NAACP Wisconsin State Conference. Brittany is a former city councilor and lives in Beloit, Wisconsin with her husband and 2 young kiddos. Brittany, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone at 350, and thank you for the opportunity to present today, and Charles and Bryan for excellent presentations. I am going to take it in a little bit in a similar direction, highlighting some of the, I would say, environmental and just like systemic injustices associated with the energy system. And really the role of state regulators and living in a community that really is a sacrifice zone for the state monopolies, elevating some of what I've learned along the way. So big things are who protects us, what is considered, and I'm going to go over some advocacy locally. Okay, so who is supposed to protect us? Charles introduced really well the Public Service Commission. And so here are the commissioners. So I was really impressed that Charles knew about them, the PSC, when he was in high school. I learned really just a couple years ago. And so here you'll see, this is Summer Chair Strand, Christine Nieto, and Marcus Hawkins. And the mission statement of the PSC is something that's really important to elevate, and I think is going to be critical as we continue to bring out public pressure to them, is to remind them that they are there to ensure we have safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible utility services, and public ensuring the interests of the environment and public health and welfare. Who else is supposed to protect us is hold on just a minute. I apologize. Who else is supposed to protect us is the DNR. And so again, they have a beautiful mission. They're here. They're supposed to protect the public, prioritize our interests, prioritize the environment. But like, what actually are they doing? And I think Bryan really helped to elevate that. And so coming from Rock County, I share a little bit of what I learned while I was serving on city council. So I've been with Healthy Climate Wisconsin for about a year and a half. And when I was in city council, I learned that Rock County had some really crazy high industrial air pollution. And so the blue line is Rock County, the orange line is Dane County, and the gray line is Winnebago County, just south of us. And so you can see that Rock County hasn't always been the industrial sacrifice zone. We had less emissions than Dane County as recent as really 2013, but then 2017, and then it spiked up. And so when I learned about this, I had to find out, like, well, what happened? What happened is our monopoly utility, Alliant, sold us that, in order to meet their climate goals, it was a necessary, they had to invest and expand their methane gas plant in Rock County, that this was a necessary bridge fuel. But really what is happening is they're consolidating their fossil fuel energy production to a few communities. And so now we have a gas plant, and as you remember, that trajectory just shot up, produces power for over 550,000 homes when Rock County only has 165,000 residents. Something that's super important when you think about utility accountability or lack thereof is they often say that, you know, this is necessary for them to hit their climate goals. And when they were selling this to Rock County, they said that when they built this out, then they would close their Edgewater coal plant in Sheboygan. They promised it'd be closed by 2022, but then this is Alliant from Alliant themselves. They shared that, oops, sorry, in 2022, we're actually going to delay it to 2025. And then again in 2024, they shared, oops, sorry, we're going to delay that again. And I think it's now like 2028. So as far as like utility accountability to their goals, to the people that are now breathing the expanded air pollution that is consolidated in Rock County, they are really getting their coal plants and their gas fire plants and profiting from all of it. And this matters for us, for our health. And then Beloit, we're advancing different climate goals and programs too. So I know Dade County and all of your efforts, you're moving and shaking towards climate action. So in Rat County, we're working on it as well. But unfortunately, given our smaller size and we are not a wealthy community, it is difficult for us to really offset and meet the pollution and really address the unjust industrial pollution that we are being served. So where does this come from? Again, so this is the EPA flight tool. It is surprisingly still available. I was just on it today. But this is from 2023, the emissions that are reported by industry. Once you hit a certain threshold, you have to report to the EPA. And this is Rat County. And as of 2023, there was more than 3 million metric tons of air pollution reported by our industrial polluters. And if you look at what is the greatest sector, almost 3 million of that is coming from the energy facilities. And then here's just a quick snapshot of how that is trending up. And really since 2017, and that gas plant started to really power up, how that has taken off. I know that some folks are like, well, that seems high, but give me some context. This is from Cook County, same time, 23 industrial polluters as compared to 6. You'll see that they are under 2 million metric tons. And from, and you can see their industrial, power plant sector is much, much lower. So 23 polluters, over 1 million metric tons less, Cook County, as compared to Rat County. And so I also just want to show Dane County. So Dane County is also doing really pretty well with industrial air pollution. And you can see that it's less than 1 million metric tons for 2023, but then appreciating like where the energy is being produced and how, what communities are being impacted and how it's being offset. So again, here is Dane County since 2011 has stayed under 1 million metric tons of industrial air pollution. But looking at where the energy comes from, MG&E is the main investor-owned utility for the Madison area. MG&E operates in a very interesting way. They often buy into their colleagues or the other investor-owned utilities in the state. So really, some of MG&E's energy is bought and then bought from Alliant and generated at the West the new gas plant that's just north of Beloit. I just learned today that they also buy from Oak Creek. And if you're thinking about that high volume of industrial air pollution and how Rat County surpassed Dane County, Milwaukee County is over 10 million tons of metric tons of greenhouse gases, and most of it comes from We Energy's coal plants at Elm Road. And so MG&E is buying from both. So we're really all connected by the energy system and by how they're generating and like the pollution. We're all paying into this because these are legal monopolies. We don't really have choices. And then when it comes to, again, that accountability and how these coal plant promises are being made and then backtracked, MG&E is also a part owner in the Columbia coal plant that retirement was just delayed for the second time. Okay, so when it comes to protection and what is considered, so the DNR is the regulator that's supposed to really protect us with the air permits through the air permitting mechanism when it comes to these large pollution sources. One big thing to elevate is that only about 1/3 of the counties in Wisconsin have regulatory monitors. And if they're not being monitored by a regulatory monitor, they really can't enforce any regulation. And so down south central Wisconsin right there, you can see that with Rat County, we do not have an air monitor all 12 months of the year. And so we're really under monitored to not monitored here in Rat County, despite the high burden of industrial air pollution. But they're protecting us, right? Well, if you're familiar with the American Lung Association State of the Air report, on the left, this is ozone. On the right, this is particulate matter. And when you look at the grades that the ALA has shared for all the monitored Wisconsin counties, majority of the counties do not have passing grades for air quality. And that does include Dane County for both ozone and particulate matter, as well as Milwaukee County, and then Rock County has a failing grade for ozone. Okay, so how is this connected with health? The areas that have these higher industrial air pollution burden reported in the EPA flight tool and higher industry have higher rates of asthma. So on the left, this is the number of asthma hospitalizations reported by the Department of Health Services. Rock County ranks 5th in the state, and then you can see other communities that are highly impacted. And then on the right here is the cancer rates, and again, disproportionately impacted. And then when it comes to energy rates, Bryan was highlighting how We Energies has repeatedly gone to the PSC and asked for rate increases. And they've been increasingly turning out the public, intervening legally. Well, right now we have several rate cases going on. Alliant is currently asking the Public Service Commission for a 16% rate increase. But really, what is it going to, right? And so looking at, they're asking to increase their percent profits on from shareholders. Their CEO salary was nearing 10 million last year. So really profits, who's being prioritized through this process, and who is the PSC protecting as they go? Okay, quick snapshot on Rock County advocacy. So I was on city council from 2020 to 2021, and I engaged the DNR when I learned of that high level of pollution. And they said, if you were concerned, well, you could monitor the air yourself. I was like, oh, okay. So they recommended these smaller community monitors. And so we used Purple Air monitors, got a variety of partners, including the local high school, got them out throughout the city. And what we found was, there's a concerning trend here. This isn't regulatory level data. We're not pretending to be air scientists. I'm a physical therapist by trade, but we were starting to find some really concerning trends. And because we were able to secure these Purple Air monitors, we were able to be considered by IQ Air, a global air group, and we were identified as the most polluted regional city in the US in 2023. Before, there were no particulate matter monitors, not even community level in Rock County. And so by just getting these monitors up, we'd received this designation. We also received a lot of pushback and discrediting efforts on behalf of the regulators and the utility. But because we have poor public health metrics, we have these high industrial air pollution levels, and our efforts have shown concerning trends, we did not stop. We created the State Line Clean Air Coalition, and I'm excited to share that 350 Wisconsin just joined our efforts. And so we are working towards a vision and a future where we all have clean air to breathe. And so we've been together again for about a year and a half, and really engaging in advocacy, education, really ultimately working to improve the health of our community. And so what does the DNR or the utility do in response? They proposed a new gas plant. They look to expand their gas burning facility in Rock County, 53 million. And as part of it, we really tried to bring out the increase public turnout and participation. And as part of it, when they moved forward with the process, the Public Service Commission actually said that there was despite 93 comments in the docket, they said that there was no significant controversy associated with the project, and no public comments have been proposed. So there's also some issues with transparency through this process. We were able to intervene legally and get them to open up a new comment period, but there are some challenges with the process and the power within this regulating process. And so despite putting in health harm reports and having hundreds of people weigh in, that gas plant was approved. And now they're looking to expand and build out a new large LNG storage facility that's over $500 million. And this is currently an open docket. So in conclusion, to wrap all that up. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here because we are really all neighbors and tied together by this energy system and these issues of environmental injustice, energy justice or injustice. We're all really being kind of failed by our regulators in this moment, and have an opportunity to really come together and address this. And ultimately, we are stronger together. That. I'm excited for the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Brittany. As a reminder, if you've got questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Next, I'm going to hand it over to my co-executive director, Stephanie Robinson, who will be able to give us all a little bit of an update on what 350 Wisconsin is working on.
Thanks, Emily. And I think I'm fine if you share your screen. So I think that would be Lee. Otherwise, I can share mine.
I am getting it up.
Thanks.
Let's see. Okay. There we go.
All right, I think we can just go ahead to the next slide. It's great to be here with all of you tonight and to be with this amazing panel. Thank you all so much. I'm going to talk a little bit about our 350 Wisconsin Climate Justice Campaign, but I am going to focus primarily on what we're doing on the affordability issue. So first of all, though, why are we doing this work? Our energy justice campaign is rooted in our commitment to climate justice, and that permeates everything we do at 350 Wisconsin. But we are trying to promote affordable and accessible energy for all, to increase renewable energy deployment, and to stop new fossil fuel infrastructure. Next. We use a variety of strategies to advance these goals, including grassroots organizing and community engagement. We advocate and we also formally intervene at the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. We'll be talking about a little bit of that in a moment. We've also created a resource hub, energyengagewwisconsin.org, because as other speakers tonight have mentioned, the engagement with the PSC can really be a black box. It can be difficult for everyday people to know how to engage. And so we created this resource to provide some really good background tools and information specific to Wisconsin that we update periodically about, what is the PSC? Because as we've heard, and even the former PSC chair said themselves, it's the most powerful regulatory agency you've never heard of. We also work in coalitions, so with our great partners here tonight, but specifically the Clean Economy Coalition of Wisconsin, Power Wisconsin Forward, and Wisconsin Homegrown Power, because we know that when we work together, we are more powerful. Next. So focusing on our goal of affordable and accessible energy for all, we conducted some energy burden studies a few years ago, led by our volunteer energy equity team, because we really wanted to look at the disparities facing low-income folks in our area here. And so far we've done 6 energy burden reports, and those were recently updated by Liz Hackton, who's our team lead, along with some of our other volunteers, using the best data that was available in 2024. And we do know that, there are, a large proportion of folks in our region here who are facing high energy burden, meaning that 6% of their income is going towards their energy bills. And many also experience severe energy burden, meaning 10% of their income is going to their bills. We also have been doing rate case advocacy, so pushing back on utility rate hikes across Wisconsin, and have intervened at the PSC in an energy burden and affordability investigation. So much like the experience of Walnut Way, we've been in this investigation for over a year, actually 2, one with MG&E and one with WPL or Alliant. Next. So these energy burden investigations came about after the last rate cases in 2023. We were arguing that the rate hikes were too high, that they were hurting low-income people, and that the utilities weren't doing enough. They needed to do more to help those energy burden customers and to try to address some of the root causes of energy burden. And the PSC actually agreed with us and said that they wanted to see the utilities do more. They needed to go beyond programs that were being investigated in other dockets like arrears management, which just helps people kind of figure out how to pay their bills over time, and also community solar. So they were supposed to look at new programs. We've also been somewhat disappointed to find out that, these investigations largely are going to result in reports prepared by PSC staff. We've been at it since spring of 2024. The other intervening stakeholders with us are Blacks for Political and Social Action of Dane County, the Citizens Utility Board, and to a lesser extent, Wisconsin's Industrial Energy Group. So what have we been advocating for in these investigations? First of all, we want the PSC to adopt the 6% standard for high energy burden. It's widely accepted nationwide, and their own study recommended that this become common throughout Wisconsin. We're also asking for a bill credit or tiered system to bring down costs. Energy efficiency programs to be enhanced. We're asking for better data collection and transparency on energy burden, because we hear, especially from MG&E, they don't really see why it's a problem, but they don't have information that they can really share about their own customers. And we want an inclusive, ongoing stakeholder engagement process. We have a pretty sophisticated intervener program in Wisconsin, but really, everyday people should have more opportunity to weigh in and be involved in these kind of decisions, not just those who, have the capacity to formally intervene. And we also acknowledge that we want more coordination with community-based organizations who are trusted in their communities and can help target some of the services that the utilities do provide to those folks in need. Next. So, as Brittany mentioned, there is a rate case going on now. So these happen every 2 years. The last one was 2023. Right now, we are having rate cases here for Alliant and MG&E. Our initial issues of concern were with WPL, that the rate increases were worsening already high energy burdens. They were looking to increase their return on equity, which is essentially profit. They were passing on some of the costs, from that transition from fossil fuels to renewables, weighting that more towards to customers, and we think that needs to be shared more equitably between shareholders and customers. They were charging customers for cost overruns on some of their renewable energy projects, and as others have mentioned tonight, corporate expenses were being passed along to customers that really don't benefit them. So incentive pay for executives, their board of directors fees, their dues to lobbying associations who work contrary to the public interest, very high corporate airfare. And they were also raising the monthly fixed charge, which basically, Bryan was talking about and Charles, we're talking about how people are frustrated because they don't feel like there's anything they can do to affect their bills. Well, when you increase folks' fixed charge, it really is something that people cannot address, because even if you try to use less energy, your fixed charge doesn't change because it's fixed. And it's also regressive because it represents a larger proportion of the bill for those on the lower end of the income spectrum. Something that happened just very recently is that the interveners in this rate case reached a settlement agreement. And we are somewhat pleased to see that there seem to be many improvements in the utilities proposal. So while we do still have significant concerns, We do see this as a victory for our advocacy on energy burden and affordability. Next slide. So we are still working our way through the agreement. It's many, many pages long, but it does appear that the rate increases have been lowered and they are now keeping the return on equity at 9.8%. We still think it's too high, but we're glad to see that they're not asking to increase it. Some of the corporate benefits have been eliminated. For example, the incentive compensation for executives, but not the industry association dues or board of directors fees. The fixed charge has been substantially reduced but not eliminated. And there are some affordability measures, some of the things that we have been asking for. So there is a proposed customer affordability pilot program. This would give low-income customers a credit on their bill of $26 monthly and about $312 annually. This is a big improvement over what they proposed in 2023. They were proposing $6 a month, which we felt was completely inadequate. They're also proposing a time of use customer switch program. So for those low-income customers that would be able to save $90 or more per year by switching to this other rate, they're proposing to do that automatically. And then they're also proposing to reduce the reconnection fees for people who have fallen into arrears for standard hours. There's also an EV pilot program with a discount of up to $500 for the purchase and installation of home chargers. And they are proposing to increase some stakeholder engagement. So there are some things here to be happy about. I think if these, we think these are changes that we really do want to see. So to the extent that, we're going to be commenting and asking members and supporters to comment to the Public Service Commission, we want to emphasize that this is the direction that we would like to see them go. Next slide. So this is the opportunity to make your voice heard. We're putting some links in the chat. The public hearing is tomorrow. But because of the settlement agreement, they did extend the public comment period to September 18th. We encourage you to stay in touch with our blog post on our website. We're updating some of the information and guidance there and talking points to reflect the new agreement. Next. We're also in the middle of the MG&E rate case. It's a little bit farther behind WPL. So the public hearing is not until September 30th, and the comment deadline is October 2nd. And we will have some guidance up on our website probably around about a week from now, September 16th. So again, the PSC has a lot of power. The three commissioners decide whether or not rate increases and other measures are approved, and they really do need to hear from all of us. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. I am aware that we are running a little bit behind schedule. So we're going to take a couple of questions from the chat, but it looks like some of the panelists have been answering questions in the chat as we've been going. So thank you for that. So one question that came up that I think is a really excellent question from Judy. Why are investor-owned utilities allowed to use ratepayer dollars to pay for lobbying and marketing? Why don't shareholders have to pay for those costs? And that's for whichever panelist wants to answer that.
From my perspective, there's just that big, large power imbalance, right? So like the shareholder profits are guaranteed by state law. And then in theory, they're supposed to be protecting us for affordability, our health, and our environment. But it's just swung so far the other direction that this is where they push themselves, right? And this is like without different accountability measures of the PSC and the utilities, this is where we are. So that really leaves like, what do we need to really push it back?
Thank you. Another question from Eve. Who is approving all of the data centers? That's a complicated question, I'm aware.
That is a complicated one. I mean, one thing just to point out is that typically it's often the local government and the local community has the first say because it's a land use issue. And the Public Service Commission doesn't really have any control over the development of a data center. It only gets to them when it gets to the point of a utility proposing some, new infrastructure to power that. So, we really need to be helping local communities and citizens and activists kind of stand up. But it's a difficult and complicated issue. It's kind of like a roaring freight train right now. That's people all over the country are trying to figure out ways to deal with it.
There are a couple tariff cases coming before the Public Service Commission. So looking at, how will the data centers, these tech companies carry their load with the cost of this new growing energy generation. All of that's like to be determined, and it's really kind of clear as mud on how it's going to go. Then there's also the DNR. Don't let them off the hook. They are, again, supposed to protect our air. And all these data centers have backup generators that are diesel powered. And just to give an example, so Microsoft section 1 and 2, so like 2 of their 3 proposed sections, to back up those areas, they permitted over 220 large diesel generators that will then be operating during blackouts, brownouts, and then also once monthly that'll power up, run for an hour, power down, and they're already in a non-attainment area. So like it's not insignificant, but they do always seem to come right under, minor addition or small permit, so they don't have to breach these larger permit precautions. So the DNR is also a lever, but it's really hard to get them to push back on an air permit.
Well, I think we are out of time. I think, please, if you haven't already been keeping up in the chat, there were some really excellent questions asked in the chat and some really good information provided there. But I will hand it over to the monthly meeting team now. And thank you so much to all of our speakers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the panel. Our next monthly meeting will be October 6th, and Leah Horowitz from the UW-Madison will be our guest speaker. And then we have another monthly meeting coming up on November 3rd, and we will be announcing the topic on that fairly soon. So I'm just going to show real briefly the times when the various teams are meeting and, well, who the contacts are for these various teams. So if you have a particular team that you might be interested in joining, then certainly you could talk to Nikki Darga tonight. She will welcome newcomers to join any team that interests them. And so if you stay on the stay on the Zoom call, then Nikki can talk with you further about that. So these are the teams briefly that meet on Monday, and then we have the teams that meet other days of the week as well. Okay, and with that, we can move into our breakout rooms. We'd stop the recording now. And for those who are new, we invite you to join the breakout room to number 2 to talk with Nikki. And for those who would like to talk further with our speakers, head to room 1. It's also an optional time for networking and socializing. So if you're tired and want an early evening, you also can sign out.